Okay, so now we have him in the final position. Here he is at 150. Now let's make him wave. So at 150, we're going to select this arm here. I guess technically his right arm, the arm on our left. And we're going to leave a keyframe, I, location, rotation. We're going to move it forward, say, I don't know, 12 or 13 frames. And then we're going to rotate it till it goes to the top position of his wave. So it looks like this, RY. Let's bring it up to the top, wherever you think he would wave, as high as it would go. And let's hit I, location, rotation. We'll move approximately the same, somewhere in there. And it doesn't have to be perfect at all. Nobody waves perfectly. RY, we'll lower the arm down to its lower position. We'll hit I for location, rotation. We'll move a little bit further. Again, RY, we'll rotate that up. We have to hit I for a location rotation keyframe. One more time down here, down. RY, something like that. I to insert a keyframe. Move one more time, up. RY. We're going to hit I for a keyframe, I, location rotation. Then we're going to move forward, and this is where his hand will drop to his side, kind of. Okay, so RY, we'll bring it down wherever you think it should go, somewhere down here. Looks good to me. So we'll hit I, location, rotation. All right, now if we left click and hold the blue part of this scrubber, we'll see that we can put it right before it, and then we can just hit the play button. And we can see that he waves. All right, cool. Now, when this arm's waving, most of the time, this arm here is moving a little bit too, so let's go back and do that. We'll take it back to the beginning, 150, where he starts to wave at 150. Let's select the other arm now with a left click. We have to leave a keyframe, I, location, rotation. If we move forward, once that hand, the other hand is about at the top somewhere, this one's going to go down slightly. So let's hit RY, just a little bit. You don't want it to be too exaggerated. Hit I to leave a keyframe. Let's move forward again as the other arm falls to the bottom, wherever that is. This arm's going to raise up just slightly. So RY, just a little bit. Hit I to leave a keyframe. And then we're going to move forward again at the height of that wave, somewhere in there. This arm is going to go down just a little bit. So RY, just a touch maybe. Left click to release that and hit I to leave a location rotation keyframe. Move forward again. The hand goes down. As it gets to its bottom position, this one's going to rotate slightly up. So RY, just a touch, not much. And then hit I for a location rotation keyframe. We're going to move forward. It goes up one last time. And then remember, this one's going to go down when that one's up. RY, just a touch. Left click to end that selection. And then hit I for a keyframe, location rotation. And then we see that his arm drops down to its position where it's ended. And this arm is going to kind of come up a little bit. So let's hit RY just to bring it slightly back up. And then let's hit I for a location rotation keyframe. Okay, so when we go back, let's play it. He waves. That other arm's kind of floppy. Kind of looks funny. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. If you thought that was too exaggerated, you can just click and delete these keyframes. And here in a minute, I'll show you the dope sheet, which allows you to also select keyframes and delete a bunch of stuff. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now let's make him leave the scene. So right here when he's done, we're going to grab onto his head by left-clicking. We're going to leave a keyframe, I, location rotation. We get this long bar. This long bar indicates that this keyframe and this keyframe are the same. The position's all the same. And we need that because if we move and make another keyframe at 250 and we don't have one in between saying we for sure on 216 need it to be right here, it'll try to blend that move from here to there in between keyframes, and it just won't look right. Okay, so we've got a keyframe for his head here. Let's move it slightly forward. It doesn't take very long to move your head. So just a couple forward, and then we're going to rotate his head in the direction he's going to travel. So RZ, he's going to travel that direction. So something like that. Left click, We're going to hit I to leave a location rotation keyframe. And that's good for that. Now his body is going to move as well at this point too. So his head just moved, and then now we want his body to move. So at the end of his head movement, we're going to left click the body and the lower body, and we're going to hit I for a keyframe, location rotation. And you can see we get that same thing. It's saying, hey, they're still in the same place, but we need it to be here at frame 222. And so now let's move it forward just a little bit. Say to frame 230, and then we can RZ to match it up to the head, something like that, in the same direction. We need to hit I to leave a keyframe, location rotation, and that looks pretty good. Now we're going to move the entire snow person using the empty. Remember, the empty is these black lines coming out of the body. If I left click and select that, now I'll be operating the empty. Okay, so we need a keyframe for here. I, location rotation. You see we get that same thing again, but we for sure need this to be here at 230. If we move this over here to another location, again, it's going to attempt to blend that movement from this one to this one. So we definitely need a marker right here. And that's all this line means. Okay, so now we want to move him to frame 250. So we have to move the scrubber. And then we're going to move him right over here outside of camera view. So it's going to look like he zips out of the camera view. So I'm going to scroll out just a little more, and then we can use GY to bring him forward, and then GX to bring him out of the view over here. And then I think I'm going to bring GY again just to bring him a little closer to us. And then let's hit GX just till his fingers, if we look right here, his fingers are just barely out of the scene. This is about where we would like our snow person to be. And the excuse me, the empty is selected, so we can hit I, location and rotation, and that will give us that keyframe right there. So let's play it back. Let's play the entire video. Go ahead and push play. We'll scroll in just a little bit. He does his thing. He waves. He turns and zips off. Okay, cool. So that is the basics of animation. We're leaving it very simple. You do whatever you like. You can have a lot of fun with this. And remember, animating anything in Blender is just that easy. You can come right over here to any of these sliders, hover over it, hit an I, and keyframe it. You can get a keyframe on one frame and then change its parameters 20 frames later, and you'll get really cool effects. Everything in Blender can be animated. So this is a very simple example of that. So hopefully you have fun with it. One last thing before we depart. If we hover over here, get back our shader editor, if we hit the icon in the upper to pick a new editor, and we pick the dope sheet, we can see that this is the dope sheet that actually covers all of the things we just did. It has all the keyframes we just did, which is kind of neat. It's kind of complex to look at. I'm not going to go into it too much, but just remember the dope sheet has all of your keyframes for every object in your scene. Okay, so I will see you in the next part, which is the render part. Okay, so here we are. Let's close up this window here. I'm just going to close it all the way. So I'm going to, again, hover till I get the double arrow icon, right click, join areas, make the arrow in this side over here, left click, and we'll close that all up. I'm also going to close down the timeline down here because we don't really need to see it as much as we did before. Okay, just to review, here is our animation that we made. And so it's looking pretty good so far. We still have to do quite a bit of work before we render it out. Okay, so let's just pause that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to apply the ground materials. Or I'm sorry, the grounds modifiers in order to get this next effect to work. It'll show us in the actual preview the effect we want, but I was having trouble getting it rendering out without applying the modifiers. So real quick, let's grab this ground by selecting it. It turns yellow. And then let's hit Shift D, and then it turns white. We know it's duplicated. And then we're going to left click once. And then I'm going to move it on the X off to the side. So GX, and let's just get it out of there. I'm going to back out there. It's weird now in Blender how it's if you drag something off the screen, it really just makes it disappear pretty fast. I don't really know if it was doing that before. I don't really recall it. I'm sorry, I'm hitting X instead of GX. So let's move it. We don't have to move it that far out of the way. All right, so all we did was duplicate that. In case we make some kind of mistake, we want to have a way of getting this back, because once we apply our modifiers, I'm going to hit 0 to go back into camera view. Once we apply the modifiers on this ground, they're going to become permanent. And so if we just duplicate that ground and have it over off to the side, it's not in our picture. It's going to jack up our vertices and edges and faces just a little bit, but it's a good emergency procedure just to make sure we have a backup copy in case we make some kind of mistake. All right, so let's select the ground here in our scene. And if we go over here to the modifiers tab and hit the wrench, we can see that we have our modifier stack with a displacement modifier that created the bumps, and also a subdivision surface modifier that smoothed it out. Now we want to apply these in the order that they're in here, so number 1. All right, so let's go ahead and just apply this. So if we hit apply for the displace, and then apply for the sub D. Now you notice that the texture changed slightly. Like I said earlier in the video, it's going to change slightly. I think it looks kind of cool this way. But if you want to mess with it, again, remember, all we have to do is come up here to Options and hover right above it, left click and drag, and then we can turn this one by this icon in the upper left corner of this header. We can turn this into a shader editor, and we'll get our stuff back. Remember, this N menu goes away by hitting the N key. All right, now if we look into the materials, we can always go back and change the strength of our bump and all that kind of stuff right here. I'm going to probably just leave the snow kind of how it is. If you want to mess with it, you can. I think this looks kind of like snow-blown snow drifts. I'm okay with it. Again, you can come in and mess with the noise texture and the bump and all that, and do that. I'm not going to spend the time doing that. Okay, so I'm going to close this window up again, which is, again, right-click when I have the double arrow icon, join areas, the arrow in this side, left click to join those areas. Okay, so now that our ground is modifiers, I keep saying materials for some reason, our modifiers are applied, we can do a dynamic paint effect. Now, what that basically says is, wherever this snowball moves through the snow, it's going to leave a trench, kind of the way a snowman would, kind of like the snowman track. And so the way that works is we have to select the ground, which it is right now. If it's not, select it and it'll become yellow. And then we can come right over here to this icon right here, which is our physics properties. If we left click it, we can come right here to the one that says dynamic paint. You can see it has a little footprint. Let's left click it. Now it's going to ask us right here, what do we want to add? Do we want to add a canvas? By default, this is already a canvas, and that's what we want to pick. If we go down below, we hit add canvas. And then we have to go down just a little bit further where it says surface type. And right now it says paint. If we click it, we're going to go to the one that says displace. So let's click that. Okay? And that's really all we have to change about that. Now if we go back to our snow person and hit the bottom snowball, left click and make sure it's selected, we'll have the option to add in the physics tab, which should still be selected. If not, remember it's this one right here. We can hit dynamic paint, and then it's asked canvas. Do you want to add a canvas? And we want to click this and say no, we want to add a brush. So there's our brush, and then let's add a brush. And that's really all we have to do here for that. Now if we go back to the beginning of our video and watch and see what happens, we can play and we'll see that it's actually digging a trench, kind of leaving a trail behind, which looks pretty cool. Okay, so before we move on to the actual render settings, let's bake this dynamic. The way we do that is we left click the ground again, and we go to the canvas settings, and we go all the way down to the bottom here where it says cache. And if we left click the little arrow next to it, we can open this up and we get a bunch of options. So let's just come, we could either hit bake here or bake all dynamics. I'm going to hit bake all dynamics. If we click that, we'll see that it runs through it real quick, and it basically just baked that, which basically means that it saved it in a special place that makes it easier to render because it's already been done. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Again, let's play the animation, and we can see that it's digging a trench wherever he goes. And it's a subtle effect, but it's kind of cool. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we're set up to do our render part.